August 26, 1994, San Francisco, United States. It's early in the morning when two FBI agents are desperately speeding through the streets of San Francisco. At the same time, a Russian woman is trying to withdraw almost $500,000 from a local bank, but the teller is attempting to convince her to wait a few minutes. However, this woman isn't an ordinary citizen. She's part of the Russian mafia and the final piece in a plan to rob the American Citibank. Time is ticking for the FBI, who have been anticipating this moment for months. And just before the woman decides to leave the bank, the agents burst inside and order her to get on the ground. Simultaneously, in Israel, a man using a fake identity is arrested while attempting to withdraw a similar sum of money. For some reason, people all over the world were attempting to withdraw millions of dollars every few weeks. And all of these funds came straight from Citibank. But there was one catch. It wasn't Citibank authorizing these transactions. Instead, it was a mysterious hacker who would go on to rob the bank of millions, resulting in an international manhunt, Russian mafia shenanigans, and a mystery that has never been solved. This is the insane story of the Citibank hack, the first cyber heist in history. This video is sponsored by NordPass, but more on that later. December 1993, St. Petersburg, Russia. It's late at night when a Russian hacker, known only as Arkanoid, is reading through the newly released Frack magazine number 42. Frack was an online magazine created for hackers, often discussing new concepts and ideas about hacking, cracking, and various other cyber-related topics. However, the 42nd issue didn't just discuss new ideas. It also contained a list of hundreds of addresses connected to the X25 network. You see, even though the Internet is the largest network today, X25 used to be the leading protocol, and most big companies used it to connect to various networks, including the Sprint network. To keep it short, the Sprint network allowed businesses to exchange data across long distances at incredibly fast speeds for the time. And although Frack magazine listed dozens of interesting companies, one stood out. Citibank, one of the largest American banks, was listed in great detail. Strangely, it didn't have a geographical location like the rest of the listed companies. This piqued Arkanoid's interest, and he quickly contacted one of his friends to help him infiltrate and explore Citibank's systems. As Arkanoid and his friend navigated through Citibank's network, they encountered someone else. Surprisingly, it was another hacker who, like them, had read the latest Frack magazine. According to a blog post Arkanoid wrote himself, everyone was allowed into Citibank's low-ranking networks. Furthermore, communication within Citibank's network was also possible. As a result, Arkanoid, his friend, their new hacker companion, and a bunch of others they met literally inside Citibank's network began to form secret research groups, all with the objective of finding sensitive data and important access points. And this is exactly what they found. The team found emails containing the credentials for none other than the credit and transfer terminals. At this point, the team had their hands on what was basically a money printing machine. However, nobody wanted to risk losing all of the work they had done just to try and transfer some money to their accounts. Nobody, except for one person. One of the people that had joined Arkanoid's team couldn't resist the urge to try, but he understood that he couldn't just send money to himself. Eventually, this unknown hacker contacted a few people to help him out, but only one person agreed to listen. Early 1994, St. Petersburg, Russia. It's late at night when the unknown hacker meets a mysterious man known as Mr. Levin. They meet at Levin's place and discuss the hacker's findings. Levin, who also has a background in programming, is highly interested in the information, but instead of working with the hacker, he wants all the information to try it on his own. The hacker eventually agrees to sell the information to Mr. Levin for a mere $100, and after he hands over the money, they get into the details. The hacker explains the entire ordeal about the Sprint network, the terminal he needed to connect to, and which credentials he had to use at each point. The next day, Levin slowly begins to infiltrate the bank's network, following the instructions he was given to a T, and after a few hours, he finds what he was promised: a terminal that was, in fact, being used to transfer money. Levin stays in the network, observing what the employees at Citibank are doing, and once all activity comes to an end, he seizes the opportunity to try and type some bank credentials into the system himself. Once again, everything works. This confirmed that the information was completely accurate. However, Levin knew that he couldn't just send money to his own bank, and began to plan a way to get the money without it leading back to him. Levin, despite being a programmer, had good connections with a local crime group known as the Tambov Gang, notorious for extortion, smuggling, and bloody gang wars over territory. He reaches out to one of his friends there and explains that he has a plan to make him and the gang a significant amount of money. All he needed was for someone to make a new bank account and withdraw money the next day. No strings attached. July 15, 1994, Lappeenranta, Finland. Levin's friend calls him and confirms that he's ready to withdraw the money. Levin then fires up his system, and while Citibank's employees are sleeping, he executes a transfer of $384,000 from the accounts of a Uruguayan real estate company to the account of his friend. Levin then quickly calls his partner, confirming that everything seemed to have gone as expected and that it was his turn to act. The man, who has no idea what the hell was actually going on, then enters the bank and requests the money. However, the teller seems suspicious about a brand new account getting a massive sum of $384,000. He leaves to talk with the bank manager, but a few minutes later, the teller comes out with the money. The man signs the receipt, takes the money, and leaves the bank with a bag full of thousands of dollars. Together with Levin, he just stole almost $500,000 in a matter of minutes without guns or violence. It had truly been the perfect heist. However, what they didn't know was that a few hours after they finished celebrating their heist, the Uruguayan real estate company alerted Citibank about the missing money, and the latter quickly discovered the fraudulent transaction. Even though they had no idea how it had happened, they immediately contacted the FBI and got ready to dive straight into one of the most insane manhunts of the 1990s. But let's jump into the future for a moment. In fact, to right now. At this exact moment, some small businesses are being hacked, and most likely it's because one of their employees had their data leaked on the dark web. Here's the thing. Many people use the same passwords for both personal accounts, like Netflix or Gmail, and their work accounts. When a personal account gets compromised, hackers use advanced tools to cross-reference the data and figure out where that person works. When they find this information, they can try the same credentials to break into the company's network. And once they're in, it's usually game over. The hackers steal more data, commit fraud, or even drain the company's finances. However, these kinds of breaches can be prevented with a password manager like NordPass. With NordPass, employees can generate and store unique, strong passwords that are nearly impossible to crack. So, even if their personal accounts are compromised, hackers won't be able to use those same credentials to access work accounts. Plus, NordPass continuously scans the dark web and will alert you if any of your credentials are found there. So, keep your workplace credentials safe and organized, and avoid wasting time by constantly resetting passwords, which adds up to 11 hours every year. I cannot recommend NordPass enough. Use the code THINKER at nordpass.com/thinker to get a free 3-month trial of NordPass Business. No credit card required. The link is in the description below. Late July 1994, New York City, USA. Only a few days after the initial report of the mysterious heist, Citibank's security team, along with a few FBI agents, came together with a single goal: to find whoever was responsible and prevent any future heists from occurring. They concluded that the perpetrators were likely still in the network. This meant they needed to carefully monitor all transactions, even after working hours. Either way, one thing was certain: the thieves would strike again, and when they did, the new team would be ready to act. Furthermore, they decided that the next transaction should be let through and would be treated as a honeypot. This way, the FBI could surveil the bank receiving the money and arrest the person attempting to withdraw the funds. And just as they predicted, another fraudulent transaction was registered only days later. Late July 1994, Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's early in the morning when a member of the Tambov gang arrives in Argentina. Immediately after landing, he drives to a local bank and opens a new account. Once he's done, he calls Levin and provides him with the account details. Levin then fires up his system and initiates a new transaction worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, this time, Citibank detects the transaction and promptly contacts both the Argentinian bank and the FBI, who in turn alert the Argentinian authorities. While the FBI is talking to the Argentinian police, Levin's money mule enters the bank and begins speaking with the bank teller. But when he requests the funds, he's informed that there's a small issue with the account and that he'll need to wait a few minutes. The gang member immediately thinks that this is suspicious and must decide whether to wait or leave. While he's pondering his decision, the Argentinian police jump into their cars and start speeding towards the bank. But once they arrive, the man is gone, and any attempts to locate him would be in vain. But he somehow contacted Levin, who then realized that his scheme had been discovered. This meant that he had to up his game, and that's exactly what he did. Mid-August 1994, Tel Aviv, Israel. This is Alexios Palmaitis, a Greek citizen who arrived in Tel Aviv from St. Petersburg a few days ago. He claimed to be a tourist, but instead of visiting historical sites, he spent his time meeting with banks and setting up new accounts. Simultaneously, a woman named Katerina Korolkova was doing the exact same thing in San Francisco. Even though they both came from St. Petersburg, nothing connected them beyond setting up bank accounts. That was until the 26th of August. On this day, not one but two suspicious transactions were initiated from Citibank's headquarters, and once again they were deposited into the respective banks in Israel and San Francisco. A few moments later, Katerina attempted to withdraw the money from the bank in San Francisco, but she was told to wait a few minutes. It turned out that Citibank had already alerted the respective banks, and they were stalling her until the FBI arrived. And this time, Levin's money mule didn't escape. Instead, she believed the teller and stayed at the register until the FBI arrived, marking the first arrest in this case. Meanwhile, the money in Israel hadn't been claimed yet. Due to the time zone difference, the Israeli undercover police were already at the bank when it opened, simply waiting for someone to request the withdrawal. And only minutes after the bank opened, Alexios Palmaitis walked through the bank's entrance and requested a massive withdrawal of tens of thousands of dollars. However, shortly after making the request, and probably after realizing the bank was full of undercover agents, the man attempted to flee, sparking a brief chase with the police. Either way, he was quickly apprehended and, surprisingly, began cursing at the police in Russian instead of Greek. It turned out that Alexios didn't actually speak Greek. In fact, he wasn't even Greek. His entire identity was fake. He was actually a Russian citizen from St. Petersburg named Alexei Lashmanov. The Israelis quickly notified the FBI of their arrest, who now had two suspects in custody and were on the verge of uncovering the truth about what was really going on. Early September 1994, New York. The first suspect in the FBI's custody, Katerina Korolkova, was now being interrogated by the lead agent on the case, known only as Steve. After explaining the situation to his prisoner, Korolkova revealed that she didn't really know what she was involved in, and also that she hadn't arrived in the US alone. Her husband, Yevgeny Korolkov, had traveled to San Francisco with her just a few days earlier. However, for reasons unknown to her, he left the country and told her to withdraw the money once he called. Fortunately for Steve, Korolkova was so upset with her husband for setting her up that she agreed to cooperate. Steve then asked her if she could persuade Yevgeny to cooperate with the FBI, and she agreed to do just that. The following phone call between the married couple allegedly became so heated that Katerina managed to convince her husband to reveal the name of the leader of the scheme and to set up a three-way call that included the FBI, Yevgeny, and the mastermind of the operation, who was a man called Vladimir Levin. A few hours later, this three-way call happened, and Yevgeny got Levin to confess to absolutely everything. Even though this was another massive win for the FBI, there was one issue. Yevgeny just snitched on everyone, and if the Tambov gang found out, his life would be in serious danger. Early September 1994, JFK Airport, New York. It's early in the morning when Katerina's husband, who had agreed to further cooperate with the FBI, arrives at JFK Airport in New York. However, for two extremely unexpected reasons, Yevgeny wasn't allowed to enter the country. Steve, who had been waiting for Yevgeny at the airport, saw that he had arrived but that he was arguing with immigration. The FBI agent then went to see what was going on and was hit with the realization that Yevgeny, a man who was about to be imprisoned with his wife, came with their daughter. Even worse, neither of the two had any visas and immigration didn't want to let them into the country. What was supposed to be an easy pickup turned into an unexpectedly complicated mess. And even though Steve was an FBI agent, the immigration staff insisted that Yevgeny wasn't allowed into the country and had to leave on the next plane for Russia. Steve then also started to heavily argue with immigration. That was, until he realized that the person he was arguing with was actually one of his childhood friends. In a funny twist, once both of them realized who they were talking to, Yevgeny and his daughter were allowed to enter the country. I know, this sounds pretty unbelievable, but Steve had an interview with Darknet Diaries, and this is pretty much what he said. Either way, once Steve got them into custody, he had to temporarily put both parents into jail and watch over their daughter, who spent a bunch of time with Steve and the other agents in the FBI's offices. Luckily for the cooperators, the FBI managed to quickly get Katerina out of jail, organized an apartment for her and her daughter, and even registered the kid for school. Either way, while Steve and the FBI were taking care of the Korolkov family, Vladimir Levin was getting pressured by the Tambov gang, who went on to force Levin to make his biggest transfer to date. September 13th, 1994, Rotterdam, the Netherlands. It's around 9 a.m., and just before a bank in the center of Rotterdam opens, a $1.5 million transaction hits their system. Seconds later, the phone rings. It's the FBI, who is stressing to the bank that someone will attempt to withdraw the money soon and that under no circumstances should they release the funds. Moments later, a tall man walks in and asks the teller to withdraw the money, insisting it be done as quickly as possible. However, just seconds after his request, the Dutch police enter the building and arrest him. Levin's plan had fallen apart once again, but this time the stakes were higher. The Tambov gang, having had enough of Levin's failed schemes, decides it's time to find him and make him pay for setting up their members. Levin now finds himself in an impossible situation, hunted internationally by the police and domestically by a ruthless mafia. But what he didn't know was that it was even worse. It turned out that the Russian authorities, who were hunting the Tambov gang, had intercepted calls between the gang and Levin, and they were now also looking for him. After a year of trying to steal millions from Citibank, Levin ended up in the worst possible situation and only had one card left to play: hide and escape. March 3rd, 1995, Stansted Airport, London, UK. It's the early morning of March 3rd, 1995, and Levin is currently in an airplane from St. Petersburg to London. He's on his way to a man called Leonid G., an old friend of his mother who had agreed to take him up until everything blew over. But what Levin didn't know was that the Russian authorities had discovered that he had left the country. They then alerted the FBI about his flight to the UK, and they, in turn, contacted the UK law enforcement agencies, who scrambled to get to the airport in time. At around noon, Levin arrives in London without any of the $400,000 that he initially stole and with the idea that he would start a new life. However, right after he exits the plane, 3 British police officers greet him and take him into custody. At the same time, Steve and a few other FBI agents are on their way to Russia because not only did the authorities alert them of Levin's flight, but also that they had found all of his equipment. It turned out that Levin was working for a computer and software company called Saturn SPB, but apparently he wasn't only working there, but also using their machines to dial into Citibank's networks. This was finally corroborated by Steve and his team, who analyzed the computers at the St. Petersburg police station, and once they found the data they were looking for, they, quote, never drank so much vodka, unquote, as they did during that night. As for Levin, he would spend 30 months in a British prison before being extradited to the US. But this isn't where his story ends. To reduce his sentence, he allegedly offered his services to US law enforcement, who accepted. However, something didn't seem to match up. It turned out that Levin didn't really know much about hacking or cracking, with many people questioning how he could pull off something like the Citibank hack. And the story gets more interesting immediately after he's released from prison in 1998. After leaving the US prison, he traveled straight to the Czech Republic and, shortly after, disappeared. Nobody knows why, but there are reports of him being murdered in Prague. It turns out that right before Levin escaped to London, he triggered a set of mysterious transactions worth several $million. He had sent $3.5 million to accounts of a Czech company called Bonaventure Management SA. Furthermore, this company reportedly belonged to one of Levin's friends, and even though it's believed that they murdered him because the money didn't arrive, others think that the owner of the company helped Levin get a new identity. Either way, one thing is clear. After visiting the Czech Republic in 1998, he vanished from the face of the earth. However, 7 years after he disappeared, his story would be reignited by a mysterious blog post on a Russian forum known for their hacking community. The article, written by a hacker that goes by Arkanoid, explains that Levin was just some ordinary guy who bought the secrets from one of the members of his hacking group, stating that the missing link between Levin's lack of skills and the depth of the hack had to be explained once and for all, and that this link was in fact him and his old hacking team. The article definitely makes sense, and up until then, nobody knew about the full extent of the hack, something that the article explained in great detail. And even though Arkanoid's identity is unknown, some even believe it could be Levin himself. Either way, whatever happened to the perpetrator of the first ever cyber bank heist remains unknown. And given the fact that a lot of people wanted his head, one can only guess what happened to him.